Chapter 4 is the radio program that is focused on bringing human rights education to all of us as Nigerians, as most of us don't quite know what our rights are or how to invoke them, or even when they've been violated. Hence, we need to analyze the concept of indivisible and inalienable human rights, social justice, fairness, and equality in Nigeria. That is what we do here on Chapter 4. Today on Chapter 4, we'll be discussing youth participation in human rights advocacy. Doing that with me today, we have Femi Ojo, the National Administrative Executive for African Youth Development Commission in Nigeria. Good afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today.
Good afternoon, Kiki.
And when it comes to fighting for human rights, the advocacy surrounding human rights, we have a very, very huge role to play. So first of all, I'd like to know what your thoughts are on the current rate of youth participation in human rights advocacy.
Though even Nigerian youths know their rights, that's the question. That's where we start from. So if you can actually answer that, so the percentage is actually low, because a whole lot do not know. So the little that even knows are not there to actually fight on, and that's it, because everybody believes, okay, it's not going to work, it's not going to work, it's not going to work, even if you want to fight on, it's not going to work. So I feel like, the percentage is actually very low, and we can actually do better. I still don't believe in the system of education we run in Nigeria, which is, it should not be about the academics, formal education alone. It should be about some other space out there, and which people don't even understand my rights. People don't understand that when a policeman meets you on the road and want to look at your phone, it's actually, for me, it's actually wrong. Which is wrong. You can't just collect my phone, you want to see my text messages or anything. So now it boils down to knowledge which people don't have, which a whole lot of young people do not have, which a lot of young people do not have. They don't actually know their right from the left and all of that. So what is the government doing to make sure that people know their right? That's the question.
Talking about formal education in schools, social studies, government, from the primary level up until secondary and then tertiary institutions. But then there is the informal education. We even have churches, places where these conversations can happen. We have churches, we have in the homes, we have the media, radio, TV, newspaper, and things like this. The places that young people interact with, because young people have to grow as rounded individuals. It means that they have to be rounded educationally. So it's not just by having a college degree, a university degree. It's also by knowing your rights, for example, and knowing how to invoke them. So in each of these institutions, let's start from the formal one, the schools. How do you think we are doing as regards advocacy and the education of human rights advocacy?
What we do in the formal space is just to teach the students about the academics, the excellence. Just in theory. So there's no actually practical knowledge for them, and that's why, most importantly, that's why we actually there's reduction where we can actually stand even with head to head with other guys out there, and that's what is actually killing us. So a whole lot of young graduates, you just see them, they study chemistry, all he or she knows is just that chemistry. Nothing else. So that's the problem. That is where the problem lies.
All right, and then we have youth groups where young people socialize in schools, outside schools, in the community age grade. The need to educate them on being like a very strong participant in advocacy for human rights. Do you see it happening in those spaces as well?
Yeah, I see it happening. If you can push for it, if you can make them understand the reason why they need to do this, they need to push for it. It's going to happen, and a whole lot of people have information is actually power. So a whole lot of people, a lot of young people who have information, and it's actually help us even to drive results in this part of the world.
All right, and then now let's go to the churches. Would you say that they have a percentage of responsibility when it comes to educating the young people on why it is important that young people are included. Okay.
You need to tell your people, you need to tell your audience, this is what is obtainable, this is that. You need to update them about the information they need to know. You need to, for instance, coronavirus is actually out. You need to tell your people on a Sunday that this is it. So you have to inform them. It's not just about coming to church, everybody gathering and praying alone. Let them know what's happening out there. Let them know you need to stop this, you need to do this, you need to do this to get yourself to the next level. I think the information the church or the church as a whole is giving to its people is actually low to what, because they have a big role to play.
Yes, they do.
So they have a big role to play. And I will tell you, if the church have actually been playing this role before now, we'll not be here where we find ourselves.
So in your opinion, has the media been very helpful? Have they been active? And if they haven't, what more do they need to do in making sure that they encourage more young people to participate in human rights advocacy?
One thing about the media is it's too political.
The media space
is political.
How so?
So I would say from this perspective that some media houses, they actually have their own agenda they pull through. So somehow when you're fighting for human rights, it actually stops those agenda you're actually pulling, because you actually work for someone that you don't want to talk against, that you don't want the person to stop what he's doing because of what you're gaining from that person. So it's actually but I feel that the media house should actually help us more, because if we are going to go to the next level, it's the media house that will actually help us more, because a lot of millions of Nigerians listen to the radio, the TV, and all the rest media platforms. So the information on the media helps. It helps. It's actually more stronger than all these places, because every day you have a smartphone. You want to listen, you want to have yourself. You want to read news through your smartphone. You want to have information via your smartphones and all of that. So I feel the media actually needs to do more.
Is there no straight line of human rights that draws across all of these media organizations and what they stand for?
So there is. What I'm saying in essence is the media house should be able to propagate this despite the agenda. It doesn't stop the agenda. You can actually be indifferent, but give the people the right information. Let them access the information rightly, because this topic is actually a real big one, and it's actually affected about more than 70% of Nigerians. Because a whole lot of people do not have access to information. They don't even have access. They don't know the policy, what the policy says. So for me, I'm actually disappointed with the fact that the government actually penetrates into the media the more, which is making it more political. So let it be a space that is actually open, so that a whole lot of information will be passed across. So we actually want to know, we stop information we really want to pass to people. It's not all the information we wanted to get through, and the media is actually disappointing in that space.
All right. I want to talk about what you said about the media getting too political, and then youth participation in politics, how it affects human rights advocacy. Just as a reminder, you're listening to Chapter 4 on Women Radio 91.7. We are discussing youth participation in human rights advocacy. And of course, I have live in the studio with me, Femi Ojo. He's the National Administrative Executive of the African Youth Development Commission here in Nigeria. We've been discussing the different roles to play in youth participation in human rights advocacy. What happens to a country when her youth do not participate in or do not know about their human rights, do not enforce their human rights, do not advocate for human rights, or do not even fight for their rights?
So for the youth not to actually participate in that, it shows then there's actually high level of problem. It's actually a big problem, because that shows you that even the youth are actually not inclusive in the government. So, and that's a problem. So even when the youth are actually inclusive in the government, they make decisions themselves. Are their decisions not influenced by the so-called cabals, by the so-called the old people? So in quote, let's use that word in quote. So that's the problem. Look at the last election, for instance. Despite the fact that the percentage of youth this time around was different from what it used to be, I will still tell you that a whole lot of youth doesn't know the right from the left. They don't even know the person to vote. It's a whole lot, actually a whole lot for us as a country. That's it.
Did you feel like there was any ripple effect? having more young people, I mean, not a lot, not that we have a lot, but at least we now have representatives in government. Did we see any effect of that?
Some of the states that have not actually made the youth to actually be part of the government is still a problem for us. Even however, don't forget the fact that for me, I'm indifferent about the Kogi state government. And whereby he's a young person that is a lot of issues in that state in court. So people use him as an example of a young person in government.
You spoke about decision making, which more or less happens at the top. There is also influence. Sometimes we have deputy governors influencing decisions of governors. We have commissioners. We have state representatives. House of Assembly members. These are all parts of governance that come together to make it one whole. And youth representation should be in every of those spaces. And when I talk about influence, I'm talking about human rights. So there is advocacy, and then there is influence for political change, for policy changes that would improve the human rights of the people of Nigeria. So having young people in these spaces, how have they been able to influence some of the laws in Nigeria, in their state, in their local government, in their community? Have they been able to do that? Have they been able to influence? Not final decision now, I'm not talking about final decision, but have their voices counted? And if you were saying that we don't have young people fighting for our human rights, it means that there are not enough people fighting for our human rights.
When you are not united, it's an advantage for the enemy. So I'm not saying we have enemies now. I'm just trying to use an example. So that's the problem, because there's no unity. So the youth can actually not influence a little.
Okay.
And the ones in power now, the ones that have actually gotten opportunity to be there, what have they achieved? What value have you added? Before you can actually influence policy decision making, you should have a value. That's my take home. Like,
Okay.
fine. Even if you're you are in governance, like you are taking a position, there's
Yes.
a value add you can actually put in, and
Yes.
somebody will respect you for who you are. Somebody will
Yes.
respect, that your expertise. That's it. But most importantly, a lot of youth doesn't. We have most of our youth mediocres, and that's the problem. So that's actually basically the problem.
Because let's face it, it's mostly majorly the youth that are on social media, and because of how many of us are there, other people are joining, because there is where our ears are there. We're waiting to listen. If you can come talk to us, so we have older people joining because they want to talk to the youth. That's where the youth are. So how can we now leverage this? How can young people in Nigeria out there listening to this radio program leverage their access to social media in advocating and fighting and influencing, affecting change for human rights?
The youth should not be shy of trying to narrate any issues they have, because I know there are a whole lot of CSOs on the social media that will actually follow it up for you. There are a lot of human rights activists that are going to follow up for you. They'll be interested in your story.
Yes.
So because a whole lot of people have stories to tell. Because when you go into communities, into villages, you know that there's a whole lot of problems. But definitely the stories are not here. But I feel like we should not give up. We should just continue narrating your stories, trying to tell us your experiences, and
Yes.
I know people will come up. People will actually pursue that for you, and at the end of the day, you'll be happy that you'll be able to actually narrate that.
Right, of course, the youth have a role to play. The youth are leaders. We say the youth are leaders of tomorrow, but honestly, I think some youth already want to be leaders of today.
Yeah, that's it.
Because it's very important. Leadership is a very integral part of advocating for human rights. Now, young people make up the ever-growing world population. As of 2014, we heard that the number of youth aged between 10 to 24 rose to nearly 1.8 billion. And that is a huge chunk when it comes to the world population. It's just slightly less than 25%. So that means youth compose the greater share of the population. So when questions begin to emerge about what we have to play, what role the youth have to play in addressing issues, we start to wonder, is this relevant to the future of the youth? Are the youth fighting for their rights, or they're fighting for the rights of the future? Of course they're fighting for the rights of the future. Human rights, it means that we want in future the young people are going to grow up to be leaders, and they want a better society for themselves. Now, how can every other person, every other demography help and be a part of this fight? Because truly, the earth belongs to all of us. So how can the youth collaborate or communicate with the older generation, the even younger generation, to help fight for human rights?
Everybody has to be united, number one. Everybody has to be united to say, okay, fine, this is what we want in our country. This is what we want in our community.
Okay.
When you are united about that and you feel like, okay, fine, if you're still in this community, we're going to kill you. And everybody knows that that's the standard, and the standard is unshakable. It's more easy for thieves to leave that community, because they know that they have a standard. They don't actually want to patch the standard. So that's the way to go. That's actually the way to go.
If we don't have youth who are empowered enough financially, for example, to run for offices, how do we then have them implement these changes, these human rights changes that will make the world a better place for us when we grow up? So how important is youth empowerment to the fight or to the advocacy for human rights?
For me, basically, I know the way the political space is actually going in Nigeria. You may really have the expertise, you may have the value and all of that, but if you don't have the money, because the high poverty level of Nigerians has cost us to where we are today. Because everybody wants to wait for that money and go and share.
Yes.
That convinces them that, okay, fine, you're a good leader. At the point, and that's it. That's the high level of literacy we find ourselves. So for me, unity goes. It actually plays a role.
Is there a way advocacy can collaborate with sports, just so we have more active young participants?
Yes, 100%. Like if you look at probably during matches, international matches, during club matches, you see where advocacy comes in. When there was racism, there's actually a high level of racism. They come before the football match, carry the placards to show people that you don't have to be a racist. Everybody, we are humans.
Yes, we're all humans.
So that's it. So that's actually a good way, because we have a high population, high number of people that actually they are interested in football, they're interested in basketball or all these other sports. So it's actually a good way to go to actually make advocacy a good thing for people to actually know, to be informed. Actually, that's it.
In Nigeria, for example, we have respectability culture, where whatever the elder says is law, and you can't challenge it. Is that hampering? What parts of culture and tradition hampers youth participation in human rights advocacy, and what part of it encourages?
Culture has actually done more harm in that regard.
In that regard.
No, that's it. But however, like I said, we just have to create a niche for ourselves. Let's just create a niche for ourselves. Let's keep going. Then we get it right.
Don't forget to tweet your thoughts at us using the hashtag Tears Chapter 4. When it comes to youth participation in human rights advocacy, it is very integral, because today's generation of young people is absolutely massive. Some 1.8 billion people are between the ages of 10 and 24. Most of them live in developing countries like ours, and sometimes they comprise of a huge percent of the population. Now, how well they navigate adolescence will determine not only the course of their own lives, but that of the world. On that note, more young people need to join their voices with advocates from all around the world in making sure that human rights abuses ends with our generation. Chapter 4 is brought to you by the Initiative for Equal Rights, and Chapter 4 holds every Thursday on Women Radio 91.7 by 3 p.m.